Good morning. This is Anna Imagination with the Healing Garden. And welcome to Subconscious Dialogues. So this is a topic that keeps popping up for me. And it's time I make a decision. I am putting together the Get Started, which is basically the welcome, let's get you on board. So it's the onboarding process. And I'm covering the ethics, going over the syllabus. You'll be able to see it. It's all on the website, Get Started. But then, and I'm putting together the ethic of the university. And I'm modeling everything after the University of Alexandria. So I got to this one moment, and I went, oh, snap. Let's think about this. So it is well known that on the University of Alexandria, on the door, like the main entrance, it was sketched in marble when you walk in. Let no man who has not studied geometry enter these walls. I studied geometry because it was on the university. In fact, I have the book over there that I grabbed and bought and studied because it was on the door of the university. And I started with geometry. So I understand why. Oh my God, let me tell you why geometry. Because geometry literally trains and shapes your brain into logic. It literally wires your nervous system and puts it right where it needs to be to do this work. So now I have a question. Do I make the same requirement on my students? The thing is, the concepts that I introduce in Triadic healing, you're not going to understand if you don't know logic. Now, if you were to sit down and actually study formal argument, debate, and logic, no, I'm going to have to stand by Plato on this one. No man who has not studied geometry may enter the healing garden. Geometry is going to be required. And it's basically the proofs. Which I think is like page 50 of this particular book. But if you're not grooming your brain into algebraic equations, if you're not grooming your brain into proofs, your brain is not going to be where it needs to be. I could say it's optional if you want to skip the geometry, but I'm going to significantly warn you that it will put you at a detriment. I think that's what I'm going to do. And I will probably categorize my students in a couple groups where it's, did you study geometry? And if you decided to skip the geometry, just have the expectation that there's going to be concepts you're not going to grasp. And if you keep having problems and troubleshooting and Q&As, if you're constantly in the membership classes and you're asking me to follow up and explain things more detailed, my follow-up question is going to be, did you study geometry? Did you study proofs? Did you study the hypotenuse? Because the more I look at this, and my daughter's scowling at me as she's getting ready for school, like, why are you saying these words? And geometry literally grooms your nervous system into the type of logical thinking you will be required to do when you do Triadic healing. Now, there are other ways you can get around this. For instance, if you study music theory, that will work. But I did not grasp music theory until I studied geometry. I struggled with music theory. I could not understand music theory until I studied geometry. As soon as I studied geometry, everything made sense to me. I felt it click in my brain. I felt the shift. It literally felt like, and this is going to be vulgar, I do apologize. It felt like my brain went from a Neanderthal's mind to an intellect because I studied geometry. Now, I was trying to study music theory prior to that. I was trying to do everything else. I was trying to study reading, writing, and literature. I was trying to read books. I was trying to read Lord of the Flies. I couldn't do any of it. I could, but I just didn't get it over and over. I just didn't get it. It was so hard to grasp simple concepts because I had Neanderthal brain. But geometry cleaned it right up. I sat down, I remember my studies came to a massive halt because no, you're not going to get any of this until and unless you study geometry. So we stopped all of my education and I went back to square one and picked up this geometry book and I did it. And that's all I did for like 6 months was just geometry. And then when I felt it shift in my mind, it was the very first perspective shift. It was amazing. It literally went from archaic mind to now you're ready to start learning about the perspectives. And sure enough, that's when ethics began. That's when my music theory took off. That's when everything clicked into place. So no, I'm going to stand by Plato. If you have not studied geometry, you can try it, but I am going to provide a solid disclaimer. This isn't going to work if you cannot grasp the basic concepts of geometry. If you have not studied geometry right up to understanding proofs, that's the point. You must understand proofs. If you don't understand proofs in geometry, we're talking about Calc 1, by the way. Algebraic equations, algebra, basic algebra into the beginnings of Calc 1. We're talking very, very basic. We're talking hypotenuse, we're talking right angles, we're talking isosceles triangles, right up to proofs. And if you don't get proofs, this material is not going to internalize like it needs to. It's just not going to, because your brain has not been turned on. That's it. Geometry, have a good day, sweetheart. Geometry is the switch that turns your brain from Neanderthal to now you're an intellect. Now you can start absorbing knowledge on a whole nother level. So I'm going to put that disclaimer in there. It's going to be optional, but it's going to come with a very, very, you really need to understand proofs. So I'm going to leave it to your disclosure or to your decision. I'm going to leave it available for you to decide for you. I'm not going to kick anybody out because they haven't studied it, but I'm also not going to be, if somebody comes to me and they keep struggling and they tell me, oh, well, I haven't studied geometry, I'm cutting you off from access to me. Because if you're not willing to do that particular type of work, then I'm wasting my time trying to shape a mind that hasn't even had that on switch turned over yet. So it's not you don't get to skip this lesson and then go on to the teacher and drain the teacher's resources because you're not wanting to do this. I don't do that. That's something that, no. So you're not going to be kicked out of the garden, but you're also not going to get access to me. So access to Anna is this requirement, is geometry, because that's the switch to turn your brain on from Neanderthal mind to intellect. That's the difference. Okay, I feel better. I feel a decision has been made. I was trying to figure out if I should do something different, like what other requirement. But in this case, why reinvent the wheel when Plato had it all figured out? And he did. He had it figured out. Like he knew this university. Like he had it figured out. And in this, and examining it, I can't argue with him. It's absolutely, he is solid. So yes, let no man who has not studied geometry enter the healing garden, or at least gain access to Anna. So thank you so much. And if you love shit like this, subscribe, like, follow, comment below. Let me know what resonated with you. And take a look at Get Started. If you want to jump into the lessons and get started with Triadic Healing and the university, go ahead and jump in below, grab my link key and just click Get Started. And that will get you over to the website and it will get you right into enrollment. There's multiple ways you can jump right into enrollment. The first one is subscribing to our newsletter. Actually, let me talk about this now. Subscribing to our newsletter is, and I'm probably going to do this on a separate video, how to enroll. You know what? That's a phenomenal idea. I'm going to stop this down and do it over there because I want that separate. So thank you so much. And may the kindest of words always find you.